Emil Cadlick here with FantasyNation.com. We have an old-timer today, a pioneer of fantasy sports for sure. He's had a fantastic career over the years doing many things that we're going to chat about. So I'm really honored to introduce David Dodds. How you doing?
Oh, outstanding. And thanks for having me.
You look great.
Thanks for trying.
Us old-timers. Anyway, so tell me about your youth. Were you interested in sports?
I was. It's funny. I never really played real football, and I say that because like every day after school, we'd come home and play sandlot football and also sandlot basketball and all of those kind of things. So we constantly would play tackle football without any helmets or pads or any of those things. But I've always just been a huge fan of football. Growing up as a kid, my dad liked it. That was Sundays. We'd watch whatever games they had on TV. I just made sure I watched it and saw it. And then, I did a lot of things. I skateboarded. I was pretty damn good at that. And then played some tennis. And then I ran track in high school as well. Was successful there. So I've always kind of had a competitive streak. And then I was also just mostly a gamer. I mean, it's funny because I think a lot of people had a real drive for football. I've just been a gamer. Parents introduced us to poker early on. In fourth grade, I was the poker champ. And I was a world-class backgammon player in high school. We played Stratego, we played Life, you name it, we were gamers. And tons of cards, pinochle, bridge, literally anything and everything that was kind of some aspect of gambling. It seemed like our family was into it. So I was really from a gamer background. And just even, I remember even in high school, friends of ours knew bookies, so we were putting bets on games and everything else for the football. So I'm just real early on, the whole gaming and every aspect of that around football kind of existed for me.
Did you ever get into chess?
I did. It's funny. I was never super great at chess because I think I was just too... I like skill games that have this randomness of luck. I loved backgammon because of that. Because it's as much as you can know exactly how to play, the dice can just screw you. Poker, same thing. The cards can just screw you. But chess, it's the people that really studied and knew all the openings, the counter to the opening, and then the harder you studied, you were just better. And at some point, you just couldn't beat people that were better. And I've always liked, I don't know, just say whatever. It's just like poker. I could be at Phil Ivey's table. I'm not going to win in the long run, but that hand I might be able to win, And so I've been more drawn to that. And I think that's what always attracted me to fantasy football. You can have all the information, you can do all the stuff. And it's wow, my star running back just went down. It's week 2, I know all of a sudden the whole deck is shifted. And now you're scrambling just to maybe make the playoffs. But I like that component of games because I just think it's just more fun that way when it's the best player doesn't always win. If the best player always won fantasy football, it probably wouldn't be very fun.
No, if you could predict the future to 100%, you and I wouldn't be talking
right
now about fantasy sports.
Right.
So tell me how you bumped into fantasy football.
So again, we picked up this magazine. I was working in Southern California for a naval base, but there was a bunch of engineers recently hired. And I just ran across this. It's caught my eye. It was a Jerry Rice cover. Loved San Francisco forever. Also loved the Chargers forever. And so I saw this as fantasy football index. I don't even know if it had index. I think it was just fantasy football the very first year. Yeah. So it's just fantasy football. It's are they really playing a game around watching football? And I just kind of scanned and go, okay, I got to buy this. And I bought it. And I'm reading through it. I'm going, oh, my goodness, there's a game around football. Who knew? And so I kind of shared it around the office. And next thing you know, we had a draft that year. And that, back in those days, you counted touchdowns and counted field goals, right? The scoring was 20 points was a good week, and then somebody's lucky defense would score 2 touchdowns. And it's oh, this is so rigged. This is so bogus. But yeah, we played, had a ball not only at the draft and then, future years, it just kept getting more and more intense, more rules, more. But I just naturally, my competitive instincts kind of kicked in, played that one year, and I was hooked. I was wow, this game is fun. And I never thought at all this would ever be a business. In those early years of playing, it's this is just something to have fun with.
What year was that when you first started?
That was 87 was our
87.
first year that we played. By 89, we were taking this stuff seriously. And it's funny, it was only like a $20 entry league, but I might have another $400 a week in side action between all the other owners. So the league, like everybody wanted to keep that down because there's some players like, I don't really want to play for much money. But I mean, we had incorporated, we had, you know, if you lost, there was a league loss tax. If you basically put together a team and you could have scored twice as many points, there was a tax in the league. If your player showed up on the cover of Sports Illustrated for that month, there was a tax. And we just started adding all these taxes and everything just to make this just more competitive, more fun, bigger prize pools. And then a bunch of us were just gambling huge stakes from my team against your team. So it didn't even matter about the trophy anymore. It was about the $400 a week I was playing on side action to just try to get really good at this.
So 87, you didn't think it was going to be a business. And then when did you finally say, you know what, maybe I can make this a business?
I still didn't. Well, I just started writing. So back in those days, like there wasn't a real internet, but there was rec, sports, fantasy, all something. I don't even know the thing anymore. It was a news group, right?
Yes.
So people had AOL accounts, people had Prodigy, Earthlink was just kind of coming online. But they all had little links over to these things called news groups. And it's like, wow, wonder if there's anything on fantasy football or just football. And it's like, next thing you know, it's like, oh, wow, there's this fantasy football news group. And there's a lot of people talking about players and situations and depth charts, and people are linking over to articles and things. And sometimes, I mean, I don't even remember how that all worked because there wasn't really an internet at that point, but people would even just write that, I think even just write an article or write down major thoughts and discussions. And that was kind of like pre-forums really in the industry. And I found myself just gravitating towards that. It's like, oh, wow, this is cool. This is a whole bunch of other people trying to get an edge on this game. And again, there was so limited information kind of pre-internet. You know, you got the USA Today. They would kind of cover recaps on Tuesday, Wednesday around the league. And it's like, but everybody's reading the same information of which there was none. And then you'd have your Fantasy Index magazine before there was more magazines. So you kind of trusted their depth charts, but then it didn't make any sense because you followed Pac-10 football. And it's like, why wouldn't this guy be better? And this guy was way better in college. And so you started thinking, man, I don't know if everybody's got this right. So in 89, I launched from AOL.com. You could open up your own website. It was like AOL.com/ whatever your login name was. So my login name, I think, was Mr. Football at the time. And instantly had a website. So I didn't know anything about how to do a website, but, Barnes & Noble or whatever, Borders, whatever the bookstore at the time, Walden's, I don't even know what the bookstores were at the time, but there was a book on how to code HTML, and I kind of learned HTML in a day and put something up on AOL, mainly just as a collection of my thoughts, as well as what I really loved was that as more and more stuff were coming on the World Wide Web, I just wanted a place where, dude, here's all the links to get over to this guy's depth chart or this guy. As more stuff started showing up, I just needed to make sure I could find it again. Because it was truly the Wild West. Like crap was everywhere. It's like, oh, these big long hashtags and this. You couldn't find anything. It's like, dude, but I can create a link. I can go to my link page and I can click and get right over to it. So it was more an organization for my thoughts. And I just had it out there. And the next thing you know, it's like, I get a, it wasn't a phone call back in those days, but an email from AOL. It says, your traffic has far exceeded what's allowed for personal web pages. And that was in 89. And it's like, what does that mean? And it's like, that means you need to take it over to a hosting service. Well, what does that mean? It was a complete foreign language to me. So take it over to a new service. Well, okay, maybe let me jump on Earthlink, see what they do. So they had something similar, wore out that welcome fast. But then all of a sudden you started seeing like, hey, we'll manage a server, we'll manage a domain, you can go get a domain and, just, again, educate yourself and kind of go through that process. So it was 89, 90 timeframe. I think I launched Mr. Football and just started putting a lot more of those thoughts to paper. And I remember at the time, it's like, okay, I had to spend, I want to say it was $80 a month to host Mr. Football. I'm like,
yeah, that was a lot of money.
Yeah. I don't really have any money coming in on this thing. Like, there's no business plan. This isn't a business. This is me, making the internet a little more friendly. And I would rather just host it on the AOL thing for free. So I thought, well, I don't know. Let me throw this stuff out there. Maybe there's an opportunity to run some advertising, whatever, to cover this stuff. And then I remember no sooner doing that. I mean, obviously, Mr. Football took off, had huge amount of traffic. And the next thing I know, I remember getting phone calls because, you'd put all your information in whois.org or whatever, and people could kind of look up who owns stuff. And it's like, hey, I'm the CEO from pets.com. It's like, I'm going to send you $6,000. Can you throw some banners on your site? And people were just throwing money at you in those early days of the .com. And it was like the weirdest thing. It's like, wow, that's just insane. Like, do you have ad banner space? And so we just started I was doing deals like that. Next thing you know, I'm making about 70, 80 grand a year on just no real advertising strategy. I mean, I eventually posted a rate sheet and we'll do this kind of crap. And no one seemed to care about anything. It was just the Wild West of the internet.
So was this, when did this start to happen? Was this
90, 91, somewhere 89, 90, 91, I think in those early years. Wow. And then, so yeah, it was just, I don't know. I mean, I was just kind of goofing off, but then a bunch of people wanted to throw me money, so I wasn't going to say no. So I just kept doing more stuff, and that stuff was pretty popular. As long as the page views were there, the advertisers seemed happy. So that was just it. Do some stuff, write some things. And again, from my gaming background, I was much more into the strategy component. Like, I followed football and knew quite a bit about football, but there were certainly probably a lot smarter people than me in really analyzing football talent and players. But the gaming piece of it, like when to do these kind of drafts, when could you punt these players, what's happening with average picking, what's just all the different tools and concepts around the game of fantasy football really intrigued me. And the strategy piece I felt was severely lacking. So I started focusing a lot more on that, got web traffic. People were kind of just throwing us money for no reason whatsoever, and and I was kind of rolling with it. And then the .com, I don't remember exactly when that happened, but the .com busted. All those pets.com went belly up. They weren't making any money. The venture capitalists kind of said, this is kind of a bad business plan. Like, what's really going on? The internet got a little smarter, and there was that time when you couldn't make any money in advertising. And that's, where most of us end up with subscription-based businesses at that point.
So you switched to subscription.
Yeah, and that didn't happen until football, guys. Like, Mr. Football was completely free all the way up to the point I sold it.
Oh, okay. Now, you sold it. Tell us about the selling of it.
Yeah, I sold it to Fanball. It was taking a lot of time. I had a really intense job, first as an engineer and then eventually running the whole Standard Missile and Tomahawk missile production. So when they say, rocket scientist, I was kind of a rocket scientist. And at Seal Beach. And so that was a hard job. Like most people's career, like if you would have got to, I eventually was running that whole operation of 65 to 70 people. For most people, that would be a career. I was this young kid who would come home from that intense job and then just hammer on the internet all day long doing this stuff.
Yeah.
And you have to remember too, like in the first web pages, none of us were smart about databases or anything. Everything was coded as just raw files.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, if a guy changed teams or this, it's like all the links broke, everything broke, right? Nothing was automatically thought about. And so I was running with Mr. Football, was hammering it, but it was just killing, like a personal toll on just my life, my married life. And I was about ready to get divorced and basically found a buyer in Fanball at the time. It was an up and coming, and essentially sold Mr. Football twofold. I wasn't really ready to be out, but I knew I just couldn't maintain all the things I was doing. So I took a year off, sold it to them, took a year off, but I took a year off to go back to school, some night school. And at the time, that was, I think you even worked on that product, was Cold Fusion was the big database, could access databases and Cold Fusion. And but I saw it happening with newspapers on the internet where, man, put everything in the same format, create the format one time, and then the database just populates it and always makes it look the same, and you don't got all these formatting. And Bob Harris and a lot of these other old timers will all tell you, it's like, it was just insane. I mean, the first internet was just so crazy. They were changing rules and this, and font spacing was weird, and some new browser would come out to interpret your page totally different. And so all of a sudden, having things in the database to control style and everything else just instantly made the world of sense. And I'm like, well, this is what I did before, and none of this really is applicable to what it really needs to be. So I sold Mr. Football. Fanball didn't pay me all my money. What else is new? But I took a year off. Focused obviously more on my normal job, focused a bit more on my marriage, and focused a lot more on just getting smart about where I thought the internet was going, which was database programming.
That's fantastic. So how did you get involved with Joe Bryant?
Yeah, so as part of that Rec Sports Alt Fantasy, whatever all that web address was or the news group was, there was a Fan X group. And these were, the premier experts or whatever. And I don't know that really was. It was some group that created fan experts, fantasy experts. And they would have a draft every year. Joe was part of that. Greg Kellogg was part of that. Terry Cannon. I mean, I could name some of the guys that. Were you part of the original foundation of that?
Well, I don't know about no, I wasn't part of the original foundation. I got involved in 96 or 97. So
people would come and kind of go in that organization. Other people would do other things, and there'd be extra spots. So Joe had a presence, and Joe even had a presence on the Rec Sports. So there was a convention that was going to happen I believe it happened in Minnesota. I want to say Paul Charchian with Fanball. They were doing one of the first fantasy football conventions. I want to say Jim Lenz's, I think, was earlier than that.
Or maybe it was Sarah. Actually, Lenz and Sarah were part of that, but I may have that.
Maybe that was. I think that I'm trying to think back on my memory. I think that was where I met Joe. So I think it was the very first fantasy insights, whatever. That was the Vegas one. I think. Maybe that's where I first met Joe.
Look at your monitor.
There it is. There it is, right there. Yeah, I'm wearing the Mr. Football, the old. Mr. Football shirt and everything. So we were selling shirts. That was the only way we were making money.
Yeah, Tropicana 1998.
Okay, so I know I showed up there and no one else showed up, right? I mean, so many things to do in Vegas. No one's going to pay money to get this stuff. And but yeah, so I met Joe, I think, originally there, and then I would say a year or two later, right at the time I was selling Mr. Football to Fanball, is when I basically approached Joe Bryant, and he was just mostly just talking about fantasy football and stuff on the Rec Sports. I said, man, I really want to go back to school, kind of learn how to do this right, and I want to do this the correct way. Do you have any interest? So the very day I'm signing the contract, supposedly with a 2-year no-compete, I'm really negotiating what my next venture is with Joe. That same meeting that they flew me out there, they're going to pay me the check. I'm like, okay, here's how to really do it. And it's when the whole idea of Football Guys broached. I said, it can't be one voice. It's what I was intrigued most about fantasy football side of it, not even from a business side, but was the water cooler talk. Is what made every draft so fun. It's what made, when you guys were doing the World Championship of Fantasy Football, it was everybody there just talking about the game and their team and everything around it. It was all that, well, you're an idiot if you really think he's second string. It was all of that water cooler talk. So my whole concept was everybody that had a website at the time, it was all this singular voice, whether it be John Hansen, whether it be Fantasy Insights, whether it be Kaplan's Report. It was like a singular voice on what that guy thought. Like, that's the expert you're paying for. And I thought just the opposite. I thought, what you really need, and that's kind of what even some of Mr. Football was, you need a link to all the experts. You need some place to find it all fast, and you need that water cooler talk to bubble up to better solutions. And I think that was the genesis. And I said, you got to have it database controlled, and it just has to be done in such a way that it's, replicatable. I mean, you can't, to churn the amount of content that people want, you got to have a whole team experts. You got to have your IDP team. You have your dynasty guys. You have, no one person's going to know it all. Mm-hmm. This is where it's all headed. So to me, that was the logical branch out to kind of create Football Guys, do it where it's not one voice, but it's a collection of voices, and create a community where people it's that water cooler talk where everybody's just talking about it.
So take a look at your monitor.
There you go.
The cheatsheets.net. That was your first phase of Football Guys, was it not?
Yeah, this is Joe's site. I'm officially under my no compete, so I'm doing some stuff probably behind the curtain. I can talk about that now because they reneged on paying me money, so the no compete really didn't matter.
Okay.
So yeah, this was Joe's venture, but definitely had my spin. I was doing some stuff behind the scenes.
And then
Joe eventually
there.
Correct.
This
and then
was
eventually
05. This picture's from 05.
They stopped paying me. They could announce I'm part of it. We rebranded as footballguys.com.
Yeah. Which is a brilliant name, by the way.
It's funny, the I want to say 2 days before I signed the contract with Fanball to sell Mr. Football was the day I picked up footballguys.com. So it existed for like ever. Like even when all these domains were being stolen, it was out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I said, I might want to have another one in my hip pocket in case I want to do this again.
Yeah, it's funny because the first time I heard Football Guys, I thought, that's kind of weird. You know, like a month later, I started to think, that's a brilliant name. Because a lot of people say, hey, I'm a football guy. I mean, it's just this natural communication.
Correct.
It must have been a great day when you hit that button and you were able to secure it.
Yeah, correct. I thought, well, I always loved my Mr. Football name, too. I thought that was something that was
Mr.
easy
Football's a great name. Unfortunately, Wayback Machine, there's a picture of you way back in 04.
Right.
You look young.
Yeah, that was many moons ago. But
yeah, I interrupted.
Yeah, I want Fanball. Obviously, they got the domain. They pointed to their servers. They then let it lapse, and KFL bought it up, and they spent most of their life trying to sell it back to me. I said, no, I'm good. We got Football Guys now. We're good.
Really?
But it is funny. I mean, the whole, all that stuff. But yeah, way back when, I mean, you have to know that too. I mean, all of those domains were possible. You could have had so many outside of fantasy football. Everybody knew that went real fast, but there were so many great names.
Oh, it's so sad because I'll sit here. I bought FSPnet.com because it was Fantasy Sports Net, FSP.
I know, 3 digits.
I thought it was I got FSPnet.com.
Okay, I got you.
Because there was ESPN.net.com. I thought, oh, this is the greatest name. It's 96 or 95. Right. I mean, crikey, I didn't even think fantasy football may have been available then. I mean, all the names I could have bought, I thought that was a great name. Like about 4 years later, it's like you're on a radio show and say, what's your domain name? FSPnet.com. They go, what?
What? Yeah.
FPB what? It's like, what was I doing?
Exactly.
You know? So I ended up getting a new domain. I actually got Fantasy Nation in like 06 on a
that's a great name, though.
It's not a bad name, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great name.
Finally doing something with it. But anyway, I babble. I apologize. I'm not supposed to be talking. I'm supposed to be listening. So, yeah, that's a great name. And you started off with, you guys got together, and you guys have done some incredible things. Tell us some of the achievements you've had.
Yeah, so again, I think we met at Jim Lenz's thing. We then kind of just talked generally. I was inking my deal to close out, had some concepts. I told him, dude, I really want to go back to school. So we kind of brainchild. It's like, what does this really look? We kind of built this around water cooler talk. Let's get multiple experts. Let's open up with a forum. And the plan was just to open up for free. The .com bust had kind of happened, but it was kind of coming back. Maybe there's some advertising. So we opened up as a free website with the whole goal of having a newsletter. And the newsletter would just be every single day from the NFL draft all the way to the Super Bowl. We would send out, here are all the biggest stories in the NFL and how that impacts fantasy. And here's the fantasy take on that story. And although that sounds really, really simple, doing that for 25 years is pretty insane. The fact that every single day that has to go out, and there's 3 to 4 hours in kind of carving up that exact thing that gets spelled out. But to our logic was, if we could make, and at the time, both Joe and I were, you can get that stuff on audio tape, but there was a book out from Seth Godin from Yahoo fame. I don't know. Do you know that name?
No, I don't.
So he's a marketing genius for Yahoo, early internet. And his whole thing was make a friend, turn a friend into a customer, and then turn a customer into buying more and more products. That was the whole logic. That was the sequence. And it obviously makes total sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So his whole thing was all about email marketing. It was like, get a list that people want to be part of and give them something of value every day. And the reality is you're slowly but surely making a friend. So that whole first year, we had no inclination of, we sold some banners and some other advertising, et cetera, but we didn't try to have a subscription service because our whole concept was let's meet, make a whole bunch of friends. Well, I remember Bob Harris is somebody we all know and love tremendously. And he's like, man, I love what you guys are doing. And, props to him and props to your magazine for giving us all shout outs and a platform to write articles and all those things as well. But I remember him saying, well, dude, if you debut with like 4,000 to 5,000 subscribers, you're going to be awesome. I'm like, dude, we'll be out of business in year 2 because if we debut with 5,000 subscribers, I'm not doing it. This is way too much work to debut for that low. But that's where the market was at. Like no one had, the internet was still extremely young. No one had a whole bunch of subscribers. So we debuted that first year. I still had, at this time, I was now in Tucson working for the Standard Missile Program Office right there in the Raytheon plant. Real intense job. And we're debuting, year 2 of Football Guy as a subscription service. And I have no idea. Like, this could be a complete rock. But it was clear there was the money in advertising wasn't what we had hoped it could be to support a whole giant, cadre of experts to really cover this the way we thought it felt that it needed to be covered correctly. We debuted with 18,000 subscribers and we never looked back. So by the end of that, by the end of August, I had quit my normal job and just said, let's just make this work. I mean, there's enough money. Let's make this work. I'll pay myself a real salary, and there's bits and pieces of money for everybody else. I'm trying to think. So we've been running, I think, 20-ish years for Football Guys. So it's 90, probably 95, somewhere in that, 6 maybe.
No,
I don't even know. There's so much. It's like all the years kind of blend into one at some point. But
it's probably later.
At some point,
it's probably closer to 99, 2000 because you met Joe in 98.
Okay, so that sounds right. 2000, 20-ish years. Yeah, that sounds right, actually. I think last year was our 20th season. So, again, all these years kind of go into one. I don't know about you, but it's like I keep time more from internet time. I remember Bob telling me early on, it's like an internet year is about 3 months. So you get about 4 internet years per year, and that's about right. I mean, just in terms of like how much changed so fast. So the email update, surprisingly, like a lot of people have asked me through the years, like, I want to start a fantasy business or I want to do this. Like, I'd say that might have been the one thing we've done that I think if anybody copied and just put their spin on it, if you could reach out to your customer virtually every day, whether it be the news stories, whether it be some key article you're doing, so you're providing value to somebody every single day, you'll have people that follow your lead, that like your style, and you build a business around that. I think if there was one thing we did right early that's kind of carried through to what we do now, that would be the one thing.
So emailing every day, you don't get a certain percentage of your customers that say, get away from me. I don't want to talk to you that often. Or
see, that's just it. Like, so when you're doing that, let's put it this way. If you're not providing value, they're going to tell you pretty quick, like, dude, get me off this list. We got subscribed. That's the first thing that shows up on our email is unsubscribe from this list.
Yeah.
So literally for the last few years, we've hovered. We start the off season around 400 and always above 400,000. I think we're at 440 some thousand right now, and we'll hit 550,000 names by time the season starts. So yeah, there are people that leave. There are emails that fall off. There are a million different reasons. Like, dude, I'm done with it. Stop yakking at me, whatever. But our point is those that remain, right? It isn't so much the people you lose. It's those that remain are the same hardcore guys that are living it, breathing it like we are. And that's somebody you just have an active voice. So whether that be for your advertisers and to promote your products that you're internally doing, or the FanDuels, the DraftKings, any of those, companies with big, large bankrolls that are willing to sponsor things. And but just to have that kind of active community, and it. I mean, you have to see it with your magazines and everything too. It's like there's a diehard group of people that they can't get enough of anything. So
that's a good point. Yeah, it's I always worry. I'm that worrywart that if I email them too frequently, they'll get mad, or you lose people, or
I think
Yahoo and Gmail will.
Our whole point was if you're just emailing them like buy my hat, buy my shirt, do this. If you're annoying, so ask yourself, just put yourself in their shoes. But essentially, our newsletter hasn't really changed, and that is basically here are the biggest stories today and their fantasy impact. Yeah. So we put the story right up front, the top. So it's like, no, stories matter. You could be on and off our email really fast. Maybe you already felt like you caught the news and don't need to read the next few days, so you're not opening all of them. But and then we'll also, once season really heats up in August, leading in the season, we post all the different content we released for that day. Yeah. Well, in August, that's 20 things a day. So people are getting it just to see what got released, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing from Dodds, nothing from Waldman, nothing from Bloom. Okay, I don't need to read it. Or maybe I do need to read it, or I love these other guys. But we found over time, it's like there's a diehard population that will literally, they can't read everything we do, but they always want to know and be abreast of what we are doing.
So that's a fantastic list. And you say it grows. Obviously, people are finding you somehow.
Right.
Your list keeps growing. How are you?
Yeah, in the early days, certainly with Mr. Football, I mean, Bob Harris was a huge instrumental piece. I mean, he had the best thing going. He was a graphics design guy. His TFL report is state-of-the-art internet when the internet all looked like crap. Yeah. And it's like all of a sudden it's like, dude, look at this awesome site. And he would and the way he even researched stories, it seemed like he just had a chronological of a guy. So Andre Rison gets hurt, he'll tell you like the last 6. So his articles were in depth and this, and everybody seemed to flock there. But in those early days, he would link out, hey, here's some cool strategy stuff happening at Mr. Football, or here's what's going on at the Huddle and Dory is offering. And so many of the websites were free at the time. He would give those shout outs, and then as we, would have a mailing list or this, we'd give those shout outs back. Hey, you're really serious about playing, buy this guy's service. And there was really just this huge grassroots movement. There were no venture capital companies. Nobody had any money. Everybody was just kind of giving shout outs back and forth. But yeah, I definitely would give a huge shout out to Bob Harris, who was just instrumental in this space that led to a lot of us having any ability to have businesses in this space, and then yourself as well. I mean, when you like Fantasy Index existed, and that magazine really hasn't changed in the billion years it's been out. I mean, he's got a blueprint of he writes these blurbs and this. But the thing that you did with your magazines, Emil, was you gave a voice to just a ton of people in the industry coming up. Hey, here's a great article on schedule strength. Here's a great article on value-based drafting. Here's how to find sleepers that fall through the cracks. Here's some statistical analysis of, running back by committee and how that works. And here's what the high stakes champion did. And so as more writers kind of developed and used your guys' platforms, it got more known. It got other people just spurring. It's like, oh, I never really thought about fantasy that way or that strategy that way. And I feel like all of us together, I don't know that we ever got in the same room and mapped out a strategy, but I think it was pretty effective in early internet to really just showcase. You guys were showcasing the writers. We in turn would say, hey, check out this cool article, and it was in Pro Forecast. Pick up a Pro Forecast because you'll elevate your game. And then more and more people are buying your magazine. It was just a catch-22 that kind of just built all of that from ground up. And that was all real money in the fantasy sports. I mean, ESPN wasn't taking seriously. They kind of laughed at it. But yeah, I think who's laughing now,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Well, what is the NFL Network and ESPN? It's half fantasy, is it not?
It is, correct. So I mean, I always laugh about that because it's like, we saw it early, and again, I don't know that I ever woke up any one day and go, wow, let's just carve out this great business. It was just something I really enjoyed doing. There was a huge passion for doing it. And the second we debuted and had enough subscribers, I needed a reason to quit and just do this full time and then just don't look back. Like it's like you're that rock star drummer, right? I'm in a band. I'm not thinking if this doesn't work. I mean, it's the reason they're all tatted up and everything else, right? It's going to work. I can look however I look because I'm a rock star drummer. This is going to work out. And that's how I think in the early industry, when this did start to work, that was at least my mindset. I'm not looking back. I want to make this work.
Yeah, a lot happened in the 90s. In our magazines, we ended up with 4 magazines about by 2000. But obviously we used everybody. We used the community to write for the magazine. And a lot
That's what made them the best, though. I mean, literally, I count my days. I would go there into every different possible place that magazine. The forecast is here. The forecast. That was the start of the fantasy season. I mean, admittedly, we were all doing that work in late May, but man, whether it was July 4th weekend or the weekend before, when that hit, to me, fantasy football is now alive. Like we are here. The forecast is here, I think just instrumental.
So did you ever, getting back into the funniness of NFL and et cetera, did you ever remember talking to the PR groups and them being upset, or how the NFL kind of didn't like it and was scared of it? Do you recall those days?
I really don't. Like, it's funny, like one of the things when Joe and I really, and I certainly, Mr. Football, I never really cared about the news. I just linked everything. In fact, one of the first things I did at Mr. Football was I spent all my time finding everything. Like, who all does a depth chart? So here's the one from Fantasy Insights. Here's the one that Sam Kaplan does. Here's the one the TFL Report has. Here's Our Lads has one. I found every link out there, and if I found another one, I would do it. And I kind of, in my mind, I would order them. So on the pull-down menu, you kind of tell, not alphabetical, it means something of just what it meant to me. But to me, it was all about, early on, collection of those resources. And news was something I never cared about. Like, to me, it was a waste of time. It's like somebody out there is killing the news. Bob had the long stories. Like, every long story that he wrote, you had to read. Like, you need to understand the history of this guy. Here's the history of the coach has said about this guy. You need to do that just to sharpen your game about the players and things. But more and more websites were coming online and doing news. And it's like, wow, the news is good for about the 15 minutes that you have it before everybody else has it. Now, early on, it did matter. But we were never, sending faxes, or we were never doing that stuff. We came online mostly, internet time. And it's like, dude, I'll just point to everybody's news. I'll give them all the credit. I wanted to be known as the site that analyzed the news, that provided the fantasy football angle to the news. And so by just relinquishing any concept of trying to do anything with the news, it makes it easy because I don't need to compete against anybody. But, dude, break the story. Awesome. Twitter, break the story. Everybody break it faster than me. Perfect. Because the faster you guys break the story, I have something to write about.
You can write about it.
And so we would use those news stories, our email update, and give a fancy impact. But literally have never, ever tried to own the news on either of the sites I've been part of. And so because of that, I just never involved with the PR. I was never involved. You get smart about reading coach speak. It's like, oh, that's what he said, but what does he really mean? I mean, you just get smart because you played enough and you've been burned by enough coaches and you kind of know who lies and doesn't lie and what that press conference mean. But we really never engaged much at all with NFL teams, I'll be frank. I mean, just never really have.
I'll be darned. So coming to the future just a little bit, it's off the top of my head. I don't want to forget it. But what do you think about the coronavirus, and what do you think the probability of the NFL season happening, A, on time, and B, delayed?
I think when you have, a $6+ billion a year industry, that is the NFL, and most of that money, or that's at least maybe just the NFL TV revenue for that. I don't even know how big the whole NFL real piece is. They will figure it out, Emil. It's like there may not be fans in the stadium, but there's so much money to be made on the TV deals that they will figure this out. I think they're 100% playing. And I think we were, I just do football. I know other fantasy companies do multiple sports, but we're lucky this all played out the way it did, because I don't know that football really, when it's all said and done, is going to have any impact at all. Like, I think the schedule will go just like the draft happened on schedule. They might not practice as much as they'd like to practice, and there'll be things, and there'll be people that test positive during the season, and there'll be hiccups along the way. But I mean, I could imagine a world that, I mean, just, you know, and I've been to my share of live games, and I can imagine a world where they blue screen a stadium and fake all the fans, and the experience is even friggin' better, right? For the TV viewing experience is even better.
At least they put some noise into fan noise they could put in.
But I mean, think about a blue screen around some of the really cool stadiums, and all of a sudden it's like, dude, they're changing it, and they're having the wave happening. It's like, dude, people could be tuning in just to watch the computer animatronics and stuff going on.
That's an interesting point. I like that idea.
So I sense, you know, this is everybody's full fear. Like, what happens is, what about a breakout? You know, the NFL's not stupid. They've got a lot of money to fix this. So we now know, you know, there's an Abbott test that can test in 15 minutes. We now know, you know, there's all this stuff going on with antibodies, and they'll have this figured out. I mean, it'll be just another line on the injury report by the time the season rolls around.
That would be fun.
And we'll all laugh about that. And so, yeah, let's just say an outbreak happens. Like, what are all these hypotheticals? Like, well, are you telling me now the football that I think may not play this year is college football? Because I think you've got so many things that have to happen in different states. It's kind of crazy to make that all happen. But the NFL, with so much money tied into the TV deals, they can play without fans quite easily and make a fortune. They'll find a way to do it. So
you would think a governor in a particular state that has a beef try and stop their.
Let's like a perfect example. There's a story that came out on Pro Football Talk today that says they made an emphasis for the two LA California teams to be able to also play in the Vegas arena. So, I mean, people have thought this through a little bit. So there's only one conflict. So the Rams, Chargers, and Raiders can all play in Vegas every week but one. There's only 1 week there's a conflict.
That's pretty good, though. I mean, that's fantastic.
So, well, that's because they're thinking maybe California isn't going to allow it, right?
Yeah.
So you move the California teams that are close enough to Vegas over to Vegas. So you got to think that other concepts happening on the other coasts. So they thought through some of those things. And they're not going to announce all those things. They don't want everybody panicking. I don't want to watch my game. Dude, let's worry about things when they actually happen. But as much, you know, crap as people give the NFL, there's some pretty smart people involved in making sure this product happens. So there's so much money at stake. I just, if there's I mean, obviously, if the whole world, I mean, for all we know, the murder hornet is what kills us all, right? And the whole world should. I mean, there's always something. But if they can play football, you got to think the minds also, as well as just the money involved, they'll make it happen.
And let me throw another thing at you. Let's say that they delay the season a month, and they started instead of the 10th of September to the 10th of October, whatever that is. And you cut out the Hall of Fame game, you cut out the bye weeks, you cut out the week between the Super Bowl, and you have the Super Bowl the 15th of February. Is that a killer?
No, and I think that's the reality. I think the reality is there's essentially, between the bye weeks, between the extra week for even the Pro Bowl, whatever game they call that, between the Super Bowl, the certain teams get a bye week off. I mean, there's some built-in flexibility anyway, as well as they could just as easily shorten the season that started. So I think if they start a season, I mean, the worst scenario would be they play 6 games and just cancel it. That would just crush the fantasy community because there's no way to have a champion or anything. Yeah. But let's say they runaways, have some problems, decide to lock all teams down for fairness for 2 weeks, try to quarantine all your players, and we'll restart another day. I think they can handle some of those hiccups and still get through this.
Yeah,
and have a conclusion. So I think
you've got one extra month.
Right.
For things to.
But I think no matter what, I think what you don't want to do is push it all the way to the right, and then you can't handle any hiccups. I think they're planning it more like, let's start on time. If we have hiccups, we can maybe accommodate a
yeah.
2-week pickup, restart, maybe a shortened season. But whatever rule they change, I mean, as fantasy providers, we will innovate. We will have, here's the ultimate rule set. If you were playing a 17-week schedule, here's the 15-week schedules. Here, I mean, we will innovate, and the fantasy players themselves will have a season.
Yeah.
We've been in
It's
front
good.
of it from day one. I don't sense it's going to change. I mean, everybody will be looking for us for advice. Like, okay, how do you do a fantasy playoff? We originally had 3 weeks and we only have 2 weeks, and there'll be all kinds of rules and things, and
That's an interesting
there'll be
point.
all kinds of innovation to get through the crazy season. But
Yeah.
what are all those hiccups could be? I don't know. We'll see,
Yeah.
right? I mean, but the scariest part is, as a business, if you're selling subscriptions, people buy and then the season just stops. It's like there's not many satisfied people. It's like, well, I drafted this great team and there's no conclusion.
Yeah.
Like none of my teams can get paid. Why did I pay for this information? And it's kind of like, selling a rotten watermelon. By the time they could actually go to eat it, it was rotten.
So it's insane. It's really stressful on top
Right.
of all the risks of illness. Running a
Right.
business is difficult to try and
I mean,
navigate all these issues.
I'm glad we just covered football, because if we covered all the other stuff, this would be pretty stressful. Like, I don't know what baseball and basketball, that stuff seems really in jeopardy. Like, some of those could just be just canceled seasons, right?
Well, they keep talking about they're doing stuff, but I'd like to see it pretty soon here, because that would aid my assumption of the NFL. If the basketball or baseball
Right.
could do something here soon,
Right.
that would make me feel good. But I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Crazy stuff.
It is a crazy world right now in regards to all this.
Well, you've had an incredible pioneer career. I've learned a little more than I already knew, and of course I probably forgot a few things. Anything else you want to add to?
No,
what you've done?
just in general, it's like, I think what drew all of us to fantasy sports, there's that camaraderie, there's that teamwork, there's that, whether you were good enough to be in sports, or you used to play it, or just liked watching it, or you're a stats geek, or you're a game theory guy. There's all these different people. And in my realm, some of the different jobs I've had, normal jobs outside of this became kind of, in the offices I at least was part of, a bunch of engineers and some smarter people. This kind of became the new golf, instead of just going out there and hitting the ball around. People still play golf. Everybody could be part of this. It took no special skill. Like, you could, I subscribe to a website, or maybe I'll just do a little more research. And it's always felt, what I've always loved about this is there's, even early on, there were tons of free information. There was stuff you could pay for that maybe was a little better, but there was always this wealth of free information. A lot of people that subscribe to us now, it's not that they can't find quality free stuff. It's been out of the time. I'm a doctor, I'm this, whatever. I'd rather just pay you. You condense it. You make it simple for me, and that saves me that's worth just a ton of time, right? I mean, to be that expert. So that's the whole thing I would say within this industry. As we've grown up, it's the sense of, we've all been part of something special. I don't think any of us saw it when it was happening. I don't think most of us were driven by money. I really don't. I think we're mostly driven by trying to crack this thing that we call fantasy football, whether it was bragging rights or just the sheer nature of, there's this beast and I already love it. So maybe I'll tell a little bit more of what I have. And so guys like Bob Harris, like I said, that really just got the word out and saying, here's how to play smarter. The David Dorys of the world, let's play smarter. And then even some of the first subscription sites that were showing, okay, this can be about making money and stuff. But a lot of us would read those things and go, wow, they did this and this and this right, but they really should have covered this better, or maybe this magazine should have been done better. And all of a sudden your magazine's reinvented. So we've seen so much innovation and just so many smart people come through this space. It's exciting to say you're part of it. I mean, it's, in some ways, this is our Silicon Valley, right? I mean, we grew up, we were the geeks that first used the internet. And I know in Bob's earlier interview, he talked about, him and I would hang out at the porn webmaster websites. And why was that? Because they were dealing with the traffic issues we were dealing with. People don't realize we were using 2,400 baud modems, and we'd have 1 million visitors to our websites that couldn't handle it. Like, how do you, there was no such thing as load balancing back in the day. There was no, Amazon cloud services to manage risk and this and go over. You literally had to have a plan. And so I laugh because it's like, we didn't care about so much about the porn, but we cared about what the porn webmasters were talking, because they were solving the high-speed clashing of a zillion people all coming to your site in August. And those were real issues that we literally faced when the internet wasn't ready for us. We were ready to do a lot more. The internet wasn't ready. So it's just pretty interesting to see it all comes full circle, and still see the David Dorys out there banging it, and Bob Harris is banging it, and the Steve Cohen's out there running a whole, series. I mean, just, it's crazy of like, wow, we're still all in this game at this age. And we moved some mountains to get to here.
Yeah, it is great to be part of it. And it's incredible how far we've gone. If we could have thought ahead, it'd be interesting.
We would have been a lot richer.
Yeah. Well, you've done quite well. It's I'm really proud of what you've done, and definitely a pioneer.
Well, you as well. I feel like you were an instrumental piece in allowing the freedom of a lot of this to happen in really fast time. I mean, Bob called out to all these different websites all the time at his TFO report. Your magazine gave all these people a talking point for those discussions to happen. And this is where it was all happening. As much as the ESPNs and the NFL networks originally downplayed it all, there was a whole other community like, well, they're idiots, because, man, this is awesome. And the water cooler talk at their offices and everything was all about this. And they eventually came into the game when they realized the money was there. But
I still find it kind of humorous. The national, the NFL, the NFL media, ESPN, and dealing with a lot of the lawsuits where the NFLPA wanted to take us over or shut us down. I find, and then all of a sudden, they were so worried about
those early FSTA meetings, no one wanted to come because the NFL was taking names to sue you. It's like, why are these people even here? Like, they don't seem like they're really representing us here.
Yeah, I was in Chicago.
The early days.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, those are the early days where, the leagues were king, and you don't have a right to exist unless we tell you have a right to exist. I mean, and you saw them even do that stuff with, they essentially chose Madden and crushed all the video game. You couldn't get a license unless you were Madden, and they kind of tried to do that with fantasy. And it's like, dude, this is the Wild West on the internet. Good luck trying to corral all of us, because anybody would literally, it took nothing to have a web page in the early days. And we showcased that. But we didn't know anything, but like, dude, day later, I got a website. I don't know. It's got some links that seem to work. And that was it. But if you had
what the NFL tried to do, the NFL tried to say they own the players, the stats, and therefore you could have a website, but you had to pay us royalties. And luckily they
well, and Charlie Wiegard's case was instrumental in kind of stopping and derailing all of that. But there's just a lot of pieces along the way. It's pretty funny, and it's funny because you think of almost every other industry. Venture capitals are almost always first movers. There'll be somebody with an idea and then just tons of money, and they get first mover space. Almost all the first movers were people bootstrapping with $500 in their pocket and were willing to work around the clock. I mean, I put an 18-hour day to get this spreadsheet up and everything. And it's like, and that was the edge we had on all the news sites, the ESPN, et cetera. It's like, yeah, when all that stuff broke on Friday, who's willing to bust ass and crunch it all into stuff and have it up there by morning? And most people weren't. Like, I'm going home. It's like, dude, I'm just beginning, right? I'm just beginning.
As you talked earlier, you were double shifting it. I like the term sweat equity. Sweat equity is,
I know, right?
I remember,
but I think virtually almost everybody you had on this series of shows, they all were sweat equity in it. Like, there were very few people that, man, I know this is going to be a landmine. I'll just get my cozy office working this. It's like, you never knew. Like, you're going to bust your butt. You have no idea. Is this going to hit? Is this going to miss?
Yep. Yeah, it's
kind of fun. We've hit and missed a bunch of things, but I think along the way we've grown a website, got a lot of people to listen, right, wrongly, and just along the way, hopefully a lot of people had a lot of fun playing fantasy football, which is kind of why we're all in this.
Yeah, I mean the nice thing about it all is you're you're part of people's hobbies. Their escape from life for a few hours every
Right.
week. You get to be part of that, and that's a great feeling to be part of people's happy times.
Someone needs to interview you for this series, because I think what you did for the World Championships of Fantasy Football also set a stage of it. Wow, there's some serious players in this that take this serious, that
And the other
are
thing
willing to
about
risk lots of money.
Yeah, lots of money.
And honestly, that's set in motion, I think, even the idea of giant contest sizing, to even allow a FanDuel or a DraftKings, any of those companies to really get, and certainly a slightly different game and soccer and all those things, but just the idea that this doesn't have to be your $20 or your free church league. There are people willing to throw down some real money. That's how serious they're taking this.
And also you were talking a lot about friends and community and whatnot. These people, they could go to Vegas, which everybody likes to go to Vegas, and meet each other, and you're part of the big thing. It's like the World Series of Poker. I'm in the biggest event in the world in fantasy sports. It's an ego trip.
And just in those relationships that were forged in those early World Championships of fantasy football, they continue on. I mean, you see them in the other high stakes events and other things, and see them around, and see them on DraftKings, and see them in FanDuel. I mean, you see them in other kind. I mean,
yeah, it's cool.
That lives on in those relationships that were forged and things as well. So
that was
like I said, somebody needs to interview you as a major innovator.
We'll get around to it. I still have about 15 more to do of these or so. I probably could do them forever, because there's a lot of people that are part of the growth of this sport. So it's been a lot of fun. It's really been therapeutic. Well, thank you so much.
Okay. Well, again, thanks for your time as well, Emil. And we were inducted the same year. It was honored to be next to you there for the Fantasy Sports Writer Hall of Fame. And I'll say it again now, same thing, man. Hats off to what you've built, the people you've nurtured along the way, the voice you've given to all of us. Much respect.
Yeah, well, thank you. And again, congratulations on being a pioneer of fantasy sports.
Okay, great.